Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, neither your male or female servant, neither your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that was in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. This is the word of God. Part of being embodied as people is living in time. You, me, we live in time. That time is part of God's creation, woven into the fabric of the space is time, that they're inseparable from each other. And when Moses came down with the Ten Commandments, as this story is one of the Ten Commandments, he did so with the people that were living in a particular time. And this law of all the other laws stands out as God declaring something in time that is sacred and special. Abraham Heschel, as a Jewish rabbi and theologian, he wrote a beautiful book on the Sabbath. This passage really stood out to me. It's a little dense, so I'll go slow, but we're largely going to be talking about some of these ideas. The Bible is more concerned with time than with space. It sees the world in the dimension of time. It pays more attention to generations, to events, than to countries or things. It is more concerned with history than geography. To understand the teaching of the Bible, one must accept its premise that time has a meaning for life, which is at least equal to that of space. That time has a significant sovereignty of its own. And I love pretend like I understand that. I love the way he talks about time as something that can be declared sacred, something that we inhabit, that's something God is concerned about, that time isn't this cycle, this endless hamster wheel we run on, but time has a direction to it. That time is taking us somewhere. Time had led these people that were slaves in Egypt into freedom, that this Ten Commandments, Sinai, came just a matter of weeks after they'd been rescued from slavery. A time of slavery that stretched back 430 years, which is a long time to be an enslaved people. They came out of Egypt, out of slavery, rescued by God. Pharaoh did not want to let his people go. Do you know why? Because the whole economy ran on their labor. And when Moses came to Pharaoh making his demands, his first initial demand was to let his people go so they can worship out in the desert, out in the wilderness, and then they'd return. This is what Pharaoh said. I'm just going to read some excerpts, some highlights from Exodus chapter 5. Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. And then, when Moses doubled down and said, look, the people of the Lord are now numerous and you are stopping them from working. So you can see that they weren't treated as people. When Moses asked him for a week off, all he could think about was the loss of production. He then made them increase the number of bricks that they produced and took the straw away, which made their work harder. He accused them of being lazy. So he made the work harder to keep working, to not pay attention to the lies, keep them so busy that this idea of a week off won't even visit their heads because they'll be too busy. Why have you met your quota of bricks yesterday as before? So it's words of quota. Lazy. That is what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let's go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get back to work. This is what God's people were delivered from. What does it say about Pharaoh and the way that they were treated for 430 years under that kind of expectation? Your job is produce. production. A day off, you must be lazy. This is the kind of thing that, this is why we have such a thing as HR. This is kind of a severe HR violation to say a week off, you're lazy. Oh, I'm just going to go ahead and call my union rep right now. But what it teaches is a people that were formed and shaped by production. I know you're going to have to imagine what it's like to be valued and shaped for your production, to be measured by the amount of work that you do, but just try to enter into a headspace where your only value comes from what you do and what you produce in that day. That to these people who had been told your job is to produce for us, and the more you complain and ask for basic decency and rights, the more we're going to keep you busy and make you work harder. Now, from Mount Sinai comes a God who says 6 days are marked for work, 1 day is marked for rest. It's for you, it's for your children. There's no chores on Sabbath. It's for all of your slave servants and employees. They get the day off. And did you see who else got mentioned? Your animals. Even your animals are given a day of rest. In his book, Heschel tells the story of somebody who was out for a walk on Sabbath, enjoying the rest, and saw a piece of his fence that he needed to mend. And so he's like, well, I'm not going to mend on the Sabbath, but I'll make it, I'll do it first thing tomorrow. So then Sunday morning, he wakes up, end of Sabbath, he goes to repair the fence, and he's struck with the idea of repair is work. That means I was preoccupied with the things that need to be done. So he left it unrepaired as a way of honoring the Sabbath. That's the kind of mentality that God's people have always held. And if you can imagine living in a world that is marked by Sabbath, where people said, oh no, we can't do youth sports on a Sunday, that's the Sabbath. We can't have our retail store open for business, that's the Sabbath. We can't have you making pizzas on a Sunday, that's the Sabbath. A world that was marked by time, where when the moment the sun went down, those candles had better be lit and the food ready, because there's no more work to be done. When the meal's done, you leave the plates on the table. You hang out as a family. Sunday, you go to worship. Then the rest of the day is spent around the table, laughing, memories, play. One of the great sacred traditions of Sabbath has always been a nap in the middle of the day to rest and relax. And a lot of Jewish writers will say that that nap is a euphemism, you know what I mean? And for the kids to know that, oh yeah, mom and dad are napping. Everything was good for the communities to cease from their work. And the way that the fourth commandment has functioned in the Ten Commandments is you have the first three commandments are fundamentally about how you relate to God. Serve me alone. Don't make an image of me. Don't use my name as leverage. Don't make vows to me. Don't use my name to invoke me towards your ends. Then the Sabbath, this bridge between how we relate to God and how we relate to each other. And then from there, don't kill each other. Don't keep your vows, honor your vows. Don't be jealous of one another, and the rest of the commandments. And then the way that the Sabbath is a bridge between how we relate to God and how we relate to each other. And you can see that embedded in there is both God established the Sabbath, and you're not to work your kids, your employees. This is a day for rest for everyone. And that central to the Ten Commandments is this time of rest to focus on how we relate to God and how we relate to one another. And I just want to pause right now and say, how beautiful does it sound to take a Sabbath yourself? How beautiful does it sound to be in a community that honors Sabbath, that rests? This is why when Mike and Rachel were telling me about their idea for food, and they thought, well, maybe we could do it this Sunday, I thought, hey, I got your back as far as the sermon, because this is what Sabbath has always meant for people. Gathering together with people of God over meal, fun, and no agenda other than just to rest. And when The way that the Sabbath is talked about in Exodus, there's two verbs that are associated with it. The first verb is remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. So in the first example is an invitation to remember. It's to be disembodied from your time into the past, that there's a memory associated with it. And then that memory brings it into the present, that we honor and that we keep it. And what the law says is, for the Lord your God created the world in 6 days, but in the seventh day he rested. So kind of implicit in that, maybe this is just me, is kind of a snarky question of, I know you might be tempted to work that day, but does your work on the same level as God's work? And if he wasn't necessary for that day, perhaps you're not either. It's this invitation to move from producing to receiving, from working into resting. What did God do on the seventh day? It says he rested. And part of what fascinates us about this idea of resting is God is in no need of rest. He's not like us where he runs out of energy. He doesn't get hangry. He doesn't really look forward to daylight savings time where he gets an extra hour of rest. He has no need of rest. So he didn't rest in part of the way that we are biologically wired to receive and to need rest. And he also, I was in a context where somebody shared, it's just he just was trying to set an example for us. And I always get a little uncomfortable when people talk about God as an actor. He was pretending to rest so that we would learn how to rest. But it does raise the question, well, what did God do on that seventh day then? If he's not play acting and if he's not in need of recharging for a little bit, what is it that God did? And part of understanding that is understanding the role and the function of the creation story. Part of the creation story is meant to mirror the creation of a temple. And so if you think about a temple, you build a temple, what's the first thing you do? You build the temple. Like you create a physical space. You take generally, they're usually built on hills, thinking that the gods are higher than us, so we'll just do him or her the service of getting a little bit closer, as close as we can. And you create the space. Within a temple, there's always the image of the deity, the god or goddess that's in there. That's why when you go to the British Museum, you see a lot of these gods that are in there. And then, of course, and this is the key part here, is the temple also had the presence of the God. That's in some ways the God is present, so that when you came into that space, you went to the image and made a sacrifice to the presence, in the presence of that deity. And the thinking is, well, if I'm here and I make a sacrifice, then the God will see me, will notice me. Otherwise, what are we doing here? That was a lot of money I just spent for something for the God to not see it. And so when you have the creation story, the account given to us in Genesis 1, you have the establishment of a temple, the earth as the temple of God, that the whole world is God's. Then you have on the sixth day the image of God, which is us. And on the seventh day, the very presence of God came into creation. That the first 6 days, he stands apart from creation as the creator. But on the seventh day, his very presence came into and entered into what he had made. That the resting he did was coming to what he had created. And what the invitation in there is to say a couple things connecting to creation. One is that the first 3 days of creation are about setting the context for life. You have light and dark, and he calls night and day. You have the earth, the firmaments of the earth and the sky, so you separate the heavens from the earth. And then you have land from sea. So you have in there a separation, and that separation comes the naming, which comes with purpose. This is what it's for. This is my intent. Then the earth is filled, now that it's suited for life, it's separated, good from chaos and disorder into order, so that life can flourish. Then on the seventh day, he creates one more demarcation, work, rest. Making a whole. People that are called into 6 days of work, but a seventh day of rest. And when God is creating those first 6 days, each day ends with the phrase, it was the first day, it was evening, then it was morning, the first day. So you can see in the beginning, those first 6 days of creation, it's marked with a day. The sun marks each of these times. But guess what happens on the seventh day? It doesn't mention the sun. There's this idea that eternity has come into this space now. And that the demarcation was 6 days in your life you work. On the seventh day, you enter into this timeless place where you remind yourselves of the goodness of creation, the very goodness of the creation of people, and the presence of God entering into time, entering into space, calling this day holy, and inviting you into a posture of rest, particularly for a people that had just come out of slavery, where they were told the very act of time off to worship was a mark of laziness, and their production was increased. Now are entering into a space where God says, enter into a rhythm of work, of production, of service, of vocation, of calling, and then a time of rest, where you just rest and remind yourself, as important as work does, it is not ultimately God's work. The good things, everything in life, ultimately is received from the hands of God. The seventh day is a time of receiving. And 7 marks completeness. There's 7 days of creation. That kind of puts a template out there for completion. But 7 appears frequently, is that an R or a W? Frequently in Scripture. You have in there's 7 key festivals and feasts that mark the year. You have cycles of 6 and 1 with the land. When you plant, when you use the soil of the land, for 6 years you can harvest those crops. On the seventh day, you let it go fallow. You just let even the land itself rest. Then, of course, you have the year of Jubilee. That the year of Jubilee is after these 7 cycles of 7 years, makes 49 on that first year of the new year. Everyone gets a new start. This is one especially I'd love to see us return to this idea of Jubilee, especially with school debt and credit card debt and whatnot. But this year where that after 7 sevens comes a restart and a new beginning. That embedded in creation is this renewal that comes through rest. Did you know that over 25% of the conflicts Jesus had with religious leaders were about the Sabbath? It's a dominant source of tension and conflict. And some of it is because it was an opportunity that he really stood out, that most of the rest of his life, Jesus lived a life that was in sync with the law of Moses. And obviously the Sabbath, he's still in sync with it, but he's sync in a world that's out of sync with it. That he comes in and stands out when he heals on the Sabbath. And particularly when you think of Jesus as Sabbath, on that seventh day, God came into the world. Now Jesus comes into the world as Sabbath rest, that he is holiness, timelessness coming into time and space. And when the Sabbath comes and it's a day of rest and healing, and he heals on that day and is accused of working on the Sabbath, I think Jesus was genuinely confused. Like, wait a minute, healing is work to you? Healing is disobeying Moses' command? I was thinking this analogy. Imagine as a child, you're growing up, and your kid, and every day your dad would come home, open the door, put his hat on his rack, put his raincoat on there, and the first thing you do is kiss your mom. And you're like, this is just, I guess, what husbands do, is they get home and they kiss their spouse. And they think that this is just some kind of ritual. This is what you do. There's no real meaning behind it or purpose. And later, maybe he's explaining, this ritual you do with mom. And they're like, look at you like, I'm sorry, what? a ritual? That when we get home from work and we see each other after being out working all day, that we kiss? You think that's a ritual? No. That is because we love, and the first person we want to connect to when we get home is each other. That's sort of how he understood the Sabbath. Like, oh, it's a rule you have to follow, and you think that that's what God matters, is that you stop from something rather than starting something, which is enjoyment. And so Jesus liked to provoke, but when you think about why Jesus healed on the Sabbath, and particularly John tells us that this is a sign, Jesus is saying, I'm healing on the Sabbath, pointing towards its true intent. You were not made for Sabbath. Sabbath was given to you as a gift. Sabbath came to you from God on a day he set aside as holy, a space that he has invited you into, beyond space and time, to rest and remember what it's all for. Just as God on the first Sabbath came into the world and enjoyed it on its own terms, just as God's first, Adam, his first day was a Sabbath day. It's like he's getting used to, like, well, what do we do around here? Today, we rest. Tomorrow, got some animals for you to name. But today, we rest. We live in an age of exhaustion. Ready for a little fill in the blank? You're going to tell on yourselves right here. Ready? Time is... What kind of a twisted people think time is money? What does it mean to be raised so that we've all heard that time is money? We've all heard that time is this opportunity you have to better yourself, better the world, make money, extract money, do more. Here's how you can be more efficient in your sleep so you can have more energy for work. This is how you balance work and life, and all these hacks and efficiencies and tips, because at the end of the day, time is money. And what the Sabbath reminds us of is time is God's. God is the Alpha. God is the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. So what we're going to do for these next few weeks is we're going to meditate on time. We're going to have a distinctively Christian view of time, what it means, what time means according to Jesus and those who reflected on his life. We're going to talk about how God views time, and not to overpromise and underdeliver, but Einstein has revealed a lot about time and space, how they're interrelated. They're not separable, which means for God to inhabit all space means by definition he inhabits all time. We'll see if I can pull that one off in a couple weeks. But for now, it's the invitation to rest. Time is not money. Time is about how all the eternal longings of our heart are invited into a space to inhabit the good world God has made with the people of God. To remind ourselves, we are not what we produce. We are not machines. We are not necessary for the world to continue to function. That we bear the image of God, are called to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy through resting. And as we come to the table, the reminder that he invites us to come with our weariness, with how burnt out we are and how little time it feels like we have, into a space of eternal rest, to bring our weariness and burdens to him. Let's close with the actual words of Jesus. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Father, invite us into the eternal space of Sabbath rest. Pull us away from the busyness, the way we feel so often crushed by all that we have to do, weary running to and fro, always busy, always running, into a space where we're simply called to rest, to enter the good world that you have made, to enjoy it on its terms, to receive from you life. For ultimately, all that we love in life is a gift from you. And Sabbath is simply an opportunity for us to stop, to enjoy it, to enjoy each other, and to acknowledge that you are the giver and creator of all good things. Thank you, most of all, for giving us Jesus Christ. In his name we pray. Amen. Please come to the table.